Hey, buddy. I'm so glad I got to see you one last time.
They say a dog is man's best friend, but what I'm about to tell you proves it's more than just a saying. My name is Raymond Carter, and this is the story of how my faithful companion exposed a truth so dark it nearly cost me everything, including my life. I never imagined my wife would be capable of what she did. For 8 years, I thought Sarah was my soulmate, my partner, the woman who stood by me through thick and thin. But sometimes the people closest to us wear the most convincing masks. Now, before I continue, I need you to do something for me. If you appreciate real stories that reveal the truth about human nature, hit that subscribe button for StoryMode Folktales right now. Seriously, don't just scroll past this. We pour our hearts into bringing you these life-changing stories. Smash that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Are you in New York, Lagos, London? I want to know. Your support keeps these stories coming, and honestly, you'd be surprised how much it means. Now let's get back to the story that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about trust. It all started 3 months ago, on a Tuesday morning that seemed perfectly ordinary. I woke up at 6:30 in the morning to the smell of burnt toast, Sarah's signature breakfast attempt. She was standing in our kitchen, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing that faded blue robe I'd bought her on our 5th anniversary. "Morning, honey," she said, sliding a plate across the counter toward me. "Made your favorite." I looked down at the blackened bread and smiled weakly. "You shouldn't have." "Oh, stop." She laughed, and that musical sound that used to make my heart skip. "I know I'm not the best cook, but it's the thought that counts, right?" I worked as a K-9 unit officer for the Portland Police Department, and my partner wasn't human. He was a 3-year-old German Shepherd named Apollo. That dog had saved my life twice in the line of duty, once when we cornered an armed robbery suspect in an abandoned warehouse, and another time when he detected an explosive device before I could walk right into it. Apollo wasn't just my work partner, he was family. Sarah knew this, or at least I thought she did. "I'm heading out early today," I told her, gulping down the orange juice she'd poured. "We've got a training session with the new recruits." "On a Tuesday?" Her green eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read. "Huh, that's unusual. Captain Brennan wants to make sure everyone's sharp. You know how it is." She nodded, but her smile seemed strained. "Of course. Will you be home for dinner?" "Should be back by 7 in the evening." I kissed her forehead, grabbed my keys, and headed out the door. Apollo was already waiting in the car, his tail wagging the moment he saw me. That dog had better instincts about people than most humans I knew. The training session went smoothly. Apollo performed flawlessly, as always, demonstrating search and rescue techniques that left the rookies impressed. My colleague, Officer Darius Mitchell, came up to me during the lunch break. "Man, that dog of yours is something else," he said, biting into his sandwich. "You ever think about what you'd do if something happened to him?" The question caught me off guard. "Honda, don't even joke about that, Darius. Apollo's healthier than both of us combined." He shrugged. "I'm just saying, these animals become part of us, you know? Losing one would be like losing a limb." I didn't know then how prophetic his words would become. That evening, I arrived home at 6:45, 15 minutes earlier than I'd told Sarah. The house was quiet, too quiet. Usually she'd have music playing or the television on, but today there was nothing but silence. "Sarah," I called out, setting my keys on the hallway table. "In the kitchen," her voice rang back. I found her stirring something in a pot on the stove, her back to me. The smell was actually pleasant for once, some kind of stew that made my stomach growl. "Wow, this smells amazing," I said, coming up behind her. "What's the occasion?" She turned, and that's when I noticed the tightness around her eyes. "No occasion. Just wanted to make you a nice dinner. You work so hard, Raymond. You deserve it." Something felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Maybe it was the way she avoided direct eye contact, or how her hands trembled slightly as she ladled the stew into bowls. We sat down at the dining table, and she watched me intently as I took the first bite. The meat was tender, the vegetables perfectly seasoned. It was genuinely the best thing she'd ever cooked. "This is incredible, Sarah. Seriously." A strange smile crossed her face. "I'm glad you like it. Eat up. There's plenty more." I devoured the entire bowl and reached for seconds. Apollo, who usually begged for table scraps, sat in the corner of the kitchen, whining softly. He wouldn't come near the table, which was unusual for him. "What's wrong with Apollo?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. "I don't know. Maybe he's not feeling well." By the time I finished my second helping, my stomach started to feel strange. Not painful exactly, just off. A subtle cramping sensation that made me shift in my seat. "You okay?" Sarah asked. "Yeah, just ate too fast, probably." I helped her clean up the dishes, and we settled on the couch to watch some television. But as the minutes ticked by, the cramping got worse. My vision started to blur at the edges, and a wave of nausea rolled through me. "Sarah, I don't feel so good." She looked at me with those green eyes, and for just a fraction of a second, I swear I saw something cold and calculating in them. But then her expression shifted to concern. "Oh no, honey. Maybe you caught a bug. Why don't you go lie down?" I stumbled toward the bedroom, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. Apollo followed me, pressing his nose against my hand, whining continuously. "It's okay, boy," I mumbled, collapsing onto the bed. But it wasn't okay. Nothing was okay. The room started spinning, and my heart began racing in my chest like it was trying to escape. Sweat poured down my face, and my hands started trembling uncontrollably. "Sarah!" I tried to call out, but my voice came out as barely a whisper. She appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed, watching me with an expression I'd never seen before. It was blank, emotionless, like she was observing a science experiment rather than her husband struggling to breathe. "Sarah, something's wrong. Call 911. She didn't move. She just stood there watching. That's when it hit me. The sudden illness, her insistence that I eat, the strange smile, Apollo's refusal to come near the food. "What did you do?" I gasped. She stepped into the room, her face still eerily calm. "I did what I had to do, Raymond. You were never supposed to find out, but Dennis convinced me this was the only way." Dennis. The name barely registered through the fog of pain and confusion clouding my mind. "Who? Dennis?" "My boyfriend," she said simply, as if she were commenting on the weather. "We've been together for 2 years. He works at the insurance company, helped me set up the policy on you. $500,000, Raymond. That's what you're worth to me dead." The words were knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. 2 years. She'd been cheating on me for 2 years, and I'd been too blind to see it. "The poison should work fairly quickly," she continued, her voice detached and clinical. "Dennis gave me something he got from a contact overseas. It'll look like a heart attack. You've been so stressed at work lately. Everyone will believe it." My vision was darkening at the edges, and my chest felt like someone was sitting on it. Apollo was barking now, loud and frantic, but Sarah ignored him. "Why?" I managed to choke out. She laughed, actually laughed. "Why? Because I'm tired of this life, Raymond. Tired of being married to a cop who makes $48,000 a year. Tired of living in this mediocre house in this mediocre neighborhood. Dennis and I are going to take your life insurance money and start fresh somewhere warm. Maybe the Bahamas." I wanted to rage, to scream, to get up and stop her, but my body wouldn't respond. I was trapped in my own failing flesh, watching my wife reveal herself as a monster. Apollo lunged at Sarah, teeth bared, but she quickly backed out of the room and slammed the door shut, locking it from the outside. "Don't worry," her muffled voice came through the door. "I'll make sure everyone knows what a devoted wife I was. How heartbroken I am over your sudden passing. I've already practiced my crying face." Her footsteps faded down the hallway, and I was left alone with Apollo and the growing certainty that I was going to die. My phone was on the nightstand, just 5 feet away, but it might as well have been 5 miles. I tried to move my arm, but it flopped uselessly at my side. Apollo paced around the bed, whining and barking, his dark eyes locked on mine. In that moment, looking at my faithful companion, I realized something. If I was going to die, there was one last thing I wanted. "Apollo," I whispered, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. "Come here, boy." He jumped onto the bed immediately, pressing his warm body against mine. I managed to move my hand just enough to rest it on his head. This was it. This was how it ended. poisoned by my own wife, locked in my bedroom, with only my dog by my side. But Apollo wasn't ready to give up on me. He suddenly jumped off the bed and started attacking the door, throwing his full weight against it repeatedly. The wood began to crack and splinter under his assault. The sound of Apollo's body slamming against the door echoed through my fading consciousness. Each impact sent splinters flying, and I could hear Sarah screaming from somewhere in the house. "Stop it! Stop that dog!" But Apollo was relentless. Years of training, combined with his desperate determination to save me, made him unstoppable. With one final, powerful lunge, the door burst open and Apollo was free. Through my blurred vision, I heard chaos erupting in the hallway. Sarah was screaming, and there was a man's voice I didn't recognize. Dennis, I assumed. "Get that animal under control," the man shouted. "I can't. He won't listen to me." Apollo barked ferociously, and I heard the sound of people running, things crashing. Then miraculously, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens. My dog, my brilliant, incredible dog, had somehow triggered the emergency alert system. I kept a panic button installed in the house after a home invasion case I'd worked on years ago. Apollo must have stepped on it during his rampage. The front door burst open, and I heard Officer Mitchell's voice. "Raymond, where are you?" "Bedroom." Sarah's voice was panicked now, all traces of her earlier calm gone. "Please help. My husband collapsed, and the dog went crazy." Footsteps thundered down the hallway, and suddenly Darius was in my room, his face swimming in and out of focus above me. "Raymond, man, stay with me. What happened?" I tried to speak, but my throat had closed up almost completely. I managed to move my eyes toward the kitchen, then back to Darius, hoping he'd understand. Apollo was there too, pressing his nose against my face, whining desperately. "Get the paramedics in here now," Darius shouted. "Art and someone secure that woman." "What? I haven't done anything." Sarah's protest was shrill with fake indignation. "My husband just collapsed. He needs help." But Darius knew me too well. He knew I'd never looked at him with such desperation in my eyes unless something was terribly wrong. He glanced around the room, his trained officer's eye catching details others might miss. The locked door, now broken. Apollo's protective stance over me. Sarah's dry eyes despite her claims of worry. "Ma'am, I need you to step back," another officer said, and I recognized the voice of Lieutenant Jamal Foster. The paramedics rushed in, and everything became a blur of activity. They loaded me onto a stretcher, hooking up IVs and monitors. Apollo tried to follow, but they wouldn't let him in the ambulance. "The dog stays," one paramedic said firmly. No. I somehow found the strength to grab the paramedic's arm. "Apollo comes." Maybe it was the desperation in my voice, or maybe they just didn't want to waste time arguing with a dying man. But they relented. Apollo jumped into the ambulance, and we raced toward Mercy General Hospital. In the emergency room, doctors and nurses swarmed around me. I heard fragments of their rapid-fire conversation. Blood pressure dropping, irregular heartbeat, possible toxin, pump his stomach. Through it all, I could hear Apollo barking from wherever they'd secured him, his cries echoing my own internal screams. A doctor leaned over me, shining a light in my eyes. "Mr. Carter, if you can hear me, blink twice." I blinked. "Good. We're going to help you. Can you tell us what happened?" Blink once for yes, twice for no. Could I tell them? With my throat seized up and my body shutting down? I blinked twice. "Did you ingest something? Food or drink?" One blink. "Yes." "Was it accidental?" Two blinks. Number. The doctor's expression hardened. "Was someone trying to hurt you?" One blink. He turned to a nurse. "Call the police. We have a possible poisoning case, and get toxicology down here, stat." The next few hours were a nightmare of tests, treatments, and procedures. They pumped my stomach, administered activated charcoal, and hooked me up to more machines than I could count. Every breath was a battle, every heartbeat a small victory. But slowly, gradually, I started to stabilize. By 3 in the morning, I could finally speak again, though my voice was hoarse and my throat felt like I'd swallowed glass. Darius was sitting in a chair beside my bed, Apollo curled up at his feet. Hospital policy be damned. He'd somehow convinced them to let my dog stay. "Welcome back," Darius said softly when my eyes opened. "You gave us quite a scare, brother." "Sarah," I croaked, "in custody. She and her boyfriend both. Want to hear something crazy? When we searched your house, we found the poison hidden in her makeup drawer. Some kind of rare compound called aconitine. Comes from a plant called wolfsbane. Dennis Kowalski works for Hartfield Insurance. Just like she said. Turns out he's been arrested twice before for insurance fraud schemes that fell apart." I closed my eyes, processing this information. My wife had tried to kill me for $500,000 and a new life with her lover. Hey, I know this is a heavy story, but I need to interrupt for just a second. If you're still watching, that means you're invested in finding out what happened to Raymond. Do me a favor, subscribe to Story Mode Folktales right now if you haven't already. These true stories deserve to be heard, and your subscription helps us keep bringing them to you. Now let's continue. "The doctors say you're lucky to be alive," Darius continued. "If Apollo hadn't broken down that door and triggered the panic button, if we hadn't gotten to you when we did, you would have been gone in another 20 minutes, Max." I reached down and touched Apollo's head. He immediately woke up, his tail wagging as he nuzzled my hand. "Good boy," I whispered. "Such a good boy." "The best," Darius agreed. "I've already written up a commendation for him. He's a hero, Raymond, saved his partner's life." Over the next 3 days, as I recovered in the hospital, out of the full scope of Sarah's betrayal came to light. Detectives discovered that she and Dennis had been planning this for 6 months. They'd researched various poisons, settled on aconitine because it was hard to detect and could mimic a heart attack if administered correctly. She'd taken out the life insurance policy 14 months ago, careful to wait past the standard 2-year contestability period before making her move. They'd already booked flights to Nassau under false names, set to leave 2 days after my projected death. Detective Maria Rodriguez came to interview me on the 3rd day. She was a sharp woman in her early 40s, with kind eyes that had seen too much of humanity's dark side. "I've been doing this job for 18 years, she told me, and this case still shocks me. The premeditation, the cold calculation. Your wife never showed a hint of remorse when we arrested her. All she cared about was whether we'd found her passport." "What about Dennis?" I asked, singing like a canary, threw Sarah under the bus the moment we put him in the interrogation room. Claims the whole thing was her idea, that she manipulated him into helping her. Says he was going to call it off, but she threatened to report him for the insurance fraud from his previous schemes. "And Sarah?" Detective Rodriguez's expression darkened. "She's sticking to a story that you must have accidentally ingested poison somehow. Claims she's the victim here, that we're persecuting a grieving wife. Her lawyer is already trying to spin this as circumstantial evidence." Rage bloomed in my chest. I told the doctors what happened. I was conscious when she admitted everything. "I know, and your testimony will be crucial. But her lawyer will argue you were delirious from the poison, that you couldn't have known what you were hearing. It's going to be a fight, Raymond." But they hadn't counted on one thing: Apollo. When the detectives had searched the house, they'd found Sarah's laptop. On it were deleted emails between her and Dennis, discussing the plan in detail. She thought she'd erased them permanently, but the forensics team recovered every single message. In one email, dated 3 weeks before the poisoning, Sarah had written, "The only problem is that damn dog. Raymond takes Apollo everywhere. Even if we succeed, the dog might be a witness. Animals can't testify in court, but Apollo knows me too well. He might react to me in a way that makes people suspicious." Dennis had replied, "So get rid of the dog first. Make it look like an accident." But Sarah had written back, "No, Raymond would be devastated and people would notice the timing. We need everything to look normal. I'll just make sure the dog isn't around when it happens." Except she hadn't counted on Apollo's loyalty overriding a locked door. The trial began 4 months later. I'd made a full recovery, though the doctors said I'd have some residual nerve damage in my hands for the rest of my life. A permanent reminder of how close I'd come to death. Sarah showed up in court looking nothing like the woman I'd married. She wore conservative clothes and minimal makeup, her hair pulled back severely. Her lawyer had clearly coached her to appear sympathetic. Sorry, but when I took the stand and told my story, every painful detail of how the woman I loved had coldly watched me die, the jury's expressions told me they saw through her act. The prosecution presented the recovered emails, the poison found in her possession, Dennis's testimony, and the life insurance policy. They brought in experts who explained how aconitine works, how it could have killed me if not for immediate medical intervention, and then they did something unprecedented. They called Apollo to the courtroom. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "we'd like to demonstrate something for the jury." Apollo walked calmly into the courtroom on a leash held by Darius. He was the picture of a well-trained police dog until he saw Sarah sitting at the defense table. The transformation was instantaneous. Apollo's hackles rose, and he began growling deep in his throat, straining against the leash. He'd never shown aggression toward anyone except genuine threats, and the jury noticed. Sarah's lawyer objected immediately. "Your Honor, this is theatrics. A dog's reaction means nothing." But the judge allowed it, noting that K-9 units were trained to detect threats and danger. Apollo's reaction to Sarah, compared to his calm behavior around everyone else in the courtroom, spoke volumes. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud. Sarah's face crumpled when the verdict was read. She looked at me across the courtroom, and for just a moment, I saw the woman I'd once loved buried beneath the monster she'd become. "Raymond? Please," she called out as the bailiffs moved to take her away. "I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Please don't let them do this to me." I stood up, my hand resting on Apollo's head. "You made your choice, Sarah. Now you live with it." She was sentenced to 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Dennis got 25 years for his role in the conspiracy. The year following the trial was the hardest of my life. People assume that once justice is served, everything goes back to normal. But how do you return to normal when the person you trusted most in the world tried to murder you for money? I threw myself into work, partnering with Apollo on every call, every case. We became something of a legend in the department. The officer who survived his wife's murder attempt and the dog who saved him. But legends don't capture the sleepless nights, the panic attacks when I'd smell food cooking, or the way I'd freeze up whenever I saw a blonde woman who reminded me of Sarah. Captain Brennan called me into his office 6 months after the trial. "Raymond, you need to talk to someone," he said, his weathered face creased with concern. "You're one of my best officers, but I can see what this is doing to you." "I'm fine, Captain." "No, you're not. And that's okay. What you went through would break most people. The department has excellent therapists. Use them." I resisted at first, too proud and too hurt to admit I needed help. But Apollo, in his infinite wisdom, made the decision for me. And we were at home one evening. I'd sold the house where everything happened and moved into a small apartment downtown when I had a particularly severe panic attack. My heart was racing, my vision tunneling, and I was convinced I was dying all over again. Apollo didn't just comfort me. He did something he'd never done before. He brought me my phone, dropped it in my lap, and then went to the door and barked. The message was clear: get help. I called the department's crisis line, and within an hour I was talking to Dr. Patricia Hayes, a trauma specialist who'd worked with officers for over 20 years. "What you experienced wasn't just a betrayal," she told me during our first session. "It was a systematic destruction of your ability to trust. And Sarah didn't just try to kill your body, she tried to kill your faith in human connection." Over the following months, Dr. Hayes helped me understand that Sarah's actions were about her own moral bankruptcy, not about my worth as a person. She helped me process the anger, the grief, and the profound sense of loss that came with realizing my marriage had been a lie. But more importantly, she helped me see what I still had: my integrity, my career, and the unwavering loyalty of my four-legged partner. Apollo remained my constant companion. He seemed to understand that I needed him more than ever, staying close during my dark moments and pulling me out of my own head when I spiraled too deep into painful memories. One afternoon, about 10 months after the trial, I received a letter. It was from Sarah, and postmarked from the Women's Correctional Facility where she was serving her sentence. I almost threw it away unopened, but something made me hesitate. Against my better judgment, I read it. "Dear Raymond," it began, and I could almost hear her voice speaking the words. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I wouldn't blame you if you tore this letter up without reading it. But I need to say some things, even if you never respond. I've had a lot of time to think in here, and I've come to realize what a monster I became. I wish I could say I was someone else when I did those things to you, but the truth is, I made conscious choices every step of the way. I chose to have an affair. I chose to prioritize money over love. I chose to see you as an obstacle instead of as the good man you always were. And I chose to try to take your life for my own selfish gain. There's no excuse for what I did, no justification. I destroyed something beautiful because I was too shallow and greedy to appreciate what I had. Dennis tries to contact me sometimes, but I refuse his letters. He was never what I thought he was. Just another person using me for his own ends, the same way I used you. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm genuinely sorry for the pain I caused you. You were a faithful husband, a good provider, and a decent man. You deserve so much better than what I gave you. I hope you found peace. I hope Apollo is still by your side. And I hope someday you'll be able to trust someone again, to open your heart to love, because you have so much love to give. Aram, I'll spend the rest of my life regretting what I threw away. Sarah. I read the letter 3 times, searching for manipulation, for hidden agendas, for any sign that this was another game. But all I found was what seemed like genuine remorse. Did it change anything? No. Did it make what she did any less horrific? Absolutely not. But it did give me something I didn't know I needed. Closure. I never wrote back. Instead, I took the letter to my next therapy session, and Dr. Hayes and I dissected it together. We talked about forgiveness, not for Sarah's benefit, but for mine. Forgiveness doesn't mean what she did was okay, Dr. Hayes explained. It means you're choosing not to let her actions poison the rest of your life. She already tried to poison your body. Don't let her poison your soul, too. It took time, but I gradually worked toward a kind of peace. Not forgetting, never forgetting, but releasing the constant anger that had been eating me alive. Meanwhile, life continued. I made detective, a promotion I'd been working toward for years. Apollo and I transitioned from patrol work to investigative support, using his incredible nose to help solve complex cases. We worked on a missing child case that made national news. 8-year-old Kiara Washington had disappeared from her backyard in broad daylight, and every hour that passed decreased the likelihood of finding her alive. Apollo picked up her scent from a stuffed toy her mother provided, and we tracked her for 3 miles through woods and residential areas. He led us straight to an abandoned hunting cabin where a registered offender had taken her. We got there just in time. Kiara was scared but unharmed, and the look on her parents' faces when we reunited them made every dark moment I'd endured worthwhile. The chief of police held a commendation ceremony, and Apollo received a medal for his service. As I stood there, watching my partner receive the recognition he deserved, I realized something profound. Sarah had tried to take everything from me, but she'd failed. She'd failed because I had Apollo, because I had colleagues who cared about me, and because I had a purpose beyond just existing. 18 months after the trial, I met someone. Her name was Althea Morrison, and she was a veterinarian who treated Apollo after he'd been injured during a drug raid. She had warm brown eyes, a quick laugh, and absolutely no tolerance for nonsense. I was terrified to even consider dating again. The wounds Sarah had left were still tender, and the idea of trusting someone new felt impossible. But Althea was patient. She didn't push, didn't demand anything I wasn't ready to give. She just spent time with me and Apollo, slowly building a friendship that felt safe and genuine. One evening, about 4 months after we'd started dating, we were sitting in her living room while Apollo dozed by the fireplace. Althea looked at me with those kind eyes and said, "You know you can trust me, right? I'm not her. I would never hurt you like that." And I realized she was right. Not every woman was Sarah. Not every person would betray me. I'd been given a second chance at life, and I owed it to myself to actually live it. "I know," I told her, "and I want to try, really try." 2 years after Sarah's conviction, Apollo and I were called to testify at a parole hearing. Sarah's lawyer was arguing for early release based on good behavior and her supposed rehabilitation. I sat in that hearing room, watching Sarah, older now, her blonde hair showing gray roots, her green eyes less vibrant than I remembered. She'd lost weight in prison, and she looked smaller somehow, diminished. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and looked directly at her. Sarah tried to murder me for money, I said clearly. She planned it for months, executed it without hesitation, and showed no remorse until she was caught and convicted. She took an oath before God and witnesses to love and cherish me, and she broke that oath in the cruelest way imaginable. I paused, gathering my thoughts. But I'm not here to ask you to keep her locked up out of vengeance. I'm here to tell you the truth about who she is and what she's capable of. Sarah is an excellent actress. She convinced me for years that she loved me while secretly plotting my death. She'll convince you she's changed, that she's sorry, that she deserves another chance. I looked directly at the parole board. Maybe she has changed. Maybe prison has transformed her into a different person. But the question you need to ask is this: are you willing to bet someone else's life on it? Because that's what early release means. You're gambling that she won't hurt someone else the way she hurt me. Sarah's parole was denied. She'd serve her full sentence. As I left the hearing, she called out to me one last time. "Raymond, please, I really have changed. I'm not the same person." I didn't even turn around. That part of my life was over. Apollo and I walked out into the sunshine, and I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of fear, of anger, of betrayal, it was still there, but it no longer defined me. Althea was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against her car with a warm smile. When she saw us, she opened her arms, and I walked into her embrace, finally understanding what it felt like to be loved by someone who actually meant it. Apollo barked happily, his tail wagging as he circled us. "How'd it go?" Althea asked. "It's over," I said simply. "Really, truly over." She kissed my forehead. "Good. Now let's go home." Home, a word that used to mean pain and betrayal, now meant something entirely different. It meant Althea's cozy house with the big backyard where Apollo could run. It meant Sunday morning pancakes and honest conversations. It meant safety and trust and love. 3 years after Sarah's trial, I stood in that same backyard, surrounded by friends and colleagues from the department. Althea was beside me in a simple white dress, her hand in mine as we exchanged vows. Apollo sat at attention right beside us, wearing a bow tie that Althea's niece had insisted he needed. He was part of the wedding party because he was part of our family. As I looked at Althea and promised to love and cherish her, to stand by her in sickness and health, I meant every word. I understood now what real commitment looked like, what genuine love required. Sarah had taught me what betrayal looked like. Apollo had taught me what loyalty meant. And Althea was teaching me that it was possible to trust again, to love again, to build something beautiful from the ashes of something broken. Darius was my best man, and in his toast at the reception, he raised his glass and said, "To Raymond, who survived the impossible, to Althea, who had the courage to love a man who'd been hurt, and to Apollo, the best partner anyone could ask for. May you all have the happiness you deserve." Everyone cheered, and Apollo barked his agreement, making the whole room laugh. As the sun set on that perfect day, I realized something important. Sarah had tried to write the ending to my story, tried to make it end with my death and her freedom, but she'd failed completely. My story didn't end in that bedroom, poisoned and dying. It continued, evolved, and transformed into something better than what came before. And the moral of this story? Listen carefully, because this is important. Evil sometimes comes wrapped in familiar faces and loving words. The people closest to us have the power to hurt us most deeply because we give them access to our hearts, our homes, and our lives. But surviving betrayal doesn't mean closing yourself off from trust forever. It means learning to recognize red flags, honoring your instincts, and understanding that one person's cruelty doesn't define humanity. Sometimes the most loyal friend you'll ever have is the one who never speaks a word, but shows up for you every single day. For me, that was Apollo. He saw the danger I was blind to, and he fought to save my life when no one else could. And finally, remember this: you are not defined by what was done to you. You are defined by how you rise from it, how you rebuild, and whether you let bitterness or hope guide your future. If this story moved you, if it made you think about loyalty, betrayal, and the power of second chances, then do me one last favor. Subscribe to StoryMode Folktales. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment and let me know what you think. Your engagement keeps these important stories alive. Sarah got 35 years. I got the rest of my life. And trust me, I plan to make every single day count.